The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, hi everybody, and good morning. Well, good morning here in Finland anyway, and in Europe. And I guess mostly we're going to have attendees that are coming from east of here and in the South Pacific and so forth. But a few hardy ones, perhaps from America, will remain. So I'd like to welcome those who are here so far. Alex and Anne, Annette, Barbara, Catherine, Frederick, Jean-Pierre, Karen, Carrie, Marissa, Mariut, Martha, Natia, Yenke, Rose, Zenaidi, and Michael, Stacy, and I are on the technical side. Well, okay, it's been a little while. I just want to let you know, in the A.S.K program at the present time, I'm substituting for Tuya. She's up in the Little Bear Meditation Center right now. And so I'll be handling those programs for a little while until I go up there, which will be shortly. I'd also like to let you know that over 100 programs now have been prepared for a treatise on white magic. I'm closing in on the end of the rules of magic for the astral plane. And I'm in the middle of the last rule for that. You know, there's this mammoth rule that exists there. It's Rule 10, and it's about 170 pages, believe it or not. Anyway, that is completed. And so you can find, I believe you can find these on our YouTube site, Moria Federation Esoteric Education. And you can also, I think, if they have been put there, probably quite a bit of them, quite a few of them have been, they'll be put on Makara. So it's a wonderful book. It's not a beginning book at all. It's really profound. And the whole thrust of the book is to deal with discipleship and all of the requirements for true discipleship. I'm quite amazed by it. You know, I haven't read it for quite a while. And now going over it very, very carefully, I find that it is, well, you know, you would expect from the Tibetan, it is profound. So if you want to avail yourself of that, I read through the whole book, you know, so at least you get what the Tibetan says, and then I try to make associations and connections and bring to light certain things that may be of use. Okay, just to let you know on that particular point. Well, now we'll just have a little alignment before we continue our reading in the science of triangles. This is the deeper part of the triangles work, but I can't say it's the more important, you know, because the most important is that we actively, carefully, and with deep feeling and as much soul infusion as we can master, that we do this triangles work with each other and make practical the transformation of the pattern of squares into the pattern of triangles. You know, and that is the quality of a etheric quality of a sacred planet. And, you know, as DK has said, the earth is interiorly sacred, but it still has to work its way out. And then one day, maybe the etheric pattern will be, excuse me, a pattern of interlocking circles, as is the sun at this time, the etheric nature of the sun, which I find to be really, really interesting. Okay, so let's have just a little alignment among ourselves. And we feel the presence of this group consciousness reflecting the consciousness of the group soul. And wherever we may be geographically, it is one consciousness that we are creating together. And our purpose is to be impressed by the profound words of Master A.S.K. and his ideas, and to find a way to put those ideas into action, into service on behalf of the divine plan which we serve. Most importantly, we serve the divine plan. And ours is the esoteric work, and he's given us work to do that he says must go on, and that work is to create and deepen and expand the network of triangles. So it takes a long time to become increasingly skilled in this kind of knowledge, but it doesn't take a long time to visualize the transmission of goodwill and love and light through the triangles we work with and through the entire network, and utilizing the great invocation as we go. And we'll sound the Om to confirm our alignment. Okay, friends, we're in this very deep section in esoteric astrology. It's about 100 pages where many of the applications of the science of triangles are undertaken, or at least introduced, because, you know, it's a huge subject. And then after we complete that, and I can't say when that will be, there are many compilations which have gathered triangles out of the many possible triangles which are within humanity and upon our globe and within our scheme and within our solar system planetarily, and involving then different stars and zodiacal triangles, which we can trace, believe it or not, to this unknown God, this supercosmic logos that we call a one about whom naught may be said. And we can take it even farther, but there's no need to go farther than that, I think. What we have to develop is the ability to look at the world and when we wish to, or when we will to see triangularly. And we have to also be aware when we meet people or work with them, when a triangle is in process of formation. Sometimes three people find themselves sitting together, and it's just like obvious that a triangle is taking place. So the alertness which will sustain this type of work, which he says must go on, each and all of us has to have that. Now, we've been working with a major triangle and its associated vehicles of expression. We've been working with the Great Bear, with Sirius, which probably really is the Little Bear, and with the Pleiades, whether it's the 7 Pleiades or when we work with the entire cluster of that, then, we're dealing probably with the head center of this great logos in whom we live and move and have our being. And he'll bring that up in a little while in terms of the old commentary. And we have to see whether we can, really understand the symbolism there. We have reviewed the, let's see, what is it here? If I can find it. No, that's not it. That's not it. I've got a few juicy compilations for you. But here we, this is the descent that we have been studying, this one. Yeah, and it's taken down 6 steps so that there are at least 18 triangles in this system by which a major triangle, Great Bear, Sirius, and Pleiades, reaches right down into our very personalities, all the way down to the base of the spine and to the solar plexus and to the throat center, all the way down. All right, now we stopped when we were going to talk about some eyes, and I have a compilation that I'd like to work with you at some time. I'm not sure that this is the right venue because the compilation itself is not particularly about triangles. It's about all the different kinds of eyes that are found in the human mechanism. But this is just a little refresher here. What we're going to talk about now, we are familiar with the idea that the right eye is the eye of buddhi and of wisdom and of vision. But it can also relate to the astral plane because these eyes have several different kinds of assignments. It's not that they mean only one thing. There's several different contexts in which you can view them. But for practical purposes, we often say the right eye of buddhi, which is the intuitional plane, and the left eye, the eye of the mind, of the common sense, which unites 5 different senses into the mind. The 6th sense, in a certain sense, is the common sense. It's the 7th sense, which is truly the esoteric sense and can begin to detect all kinds of esoteric causes and sources behind the world of effects. So through these eyes, we have what is called buddhi manas, and that takes place within the spiritual triad. Now, my computer has been acting up a little bit, so I kind of hesitate to go to the map because I might not get back. So the right eye of buddhi, the left eye of mind or manas, and then there's what's called the Eye of Shiva, the all-seeing eye, the eye which directs the will and purposes of deity. It is used by the higher agencies within our energy system. Ultimately, it is used by the monad, and this Eye of Shiva is the one we find in the center of the head. It is not the pineal gland per se. It's the blue eye, it's the third eye, and it's the etheric area around the pineal gland, and it's a synthetic eye. Now, you can realize when you think about the Kundalini and its triple channels, we have the Ida, the Pingala, and the Sushumna. The way they are usually considered is that the Sushumna is synthetic and correlates with the third eye. The Ida correlates with the eye of Manas, and the Pingala, the eye of the soul, correlates with the eye of Buddhi. So there are different ways to link these triangles. At a certain point, in order to achieve the proper rising of the Kundalini energy under controlled conditions and according to our monadic ray, it is the mechanism in the head which is used to elevate this triple power. Well, you know, when the time is right, we will be under the proper supervision for that. But meanwhile, there's so much to straighten out in our natures and to clarify and to improve. We can't really get ahead of ourselves, and people who are overly ambitious in that regard and put the rising of the Kundalini ahead of their service even don't come to a good end. So this is the way things are usually considered. These eyes together in the Eye of Shiva reconcile the pairs of opposites. Now, what usually are the pairs of opposites when you think about them? We have an even-armed cross, okay? Now you can have, I may have said this before, but you can have opposites that are on a horizontal level, and neither one is better than the other. They are just conditions along a continuum. You have hot and you have cold, you have high and you have low, you know, you have in and you have out, you know. Those kinds of opposites do not have a value judgment connected with them. But the vertical pairs of opposites, they do have a value judgment connected with them. And the higher of the pairs of opposites is the soul, and the lower the personality, until we extend the idea that the higher of the pairs of opposites is the monad, and the lower of the pairs of opposites is the soul-infused personality. And we can go on extending until the higher of the pairs of opposites is the planetary logos itself, and the lower is the human unit, completely integrated from monad to the base of the spine, involving all the three aspects. So when we talk about pairs of opposites on the vertical plane, well, it's not a plane, but on the vertical dimension, that central point is always moving upwards, and the relationship between the two is ever more complete on the lower end and ever more inclusive on the higher. So anyway, another way to look at this is that the third eye can represent the monad, and yeah, the right eye, the faculty of buddhi, and the left eye, the higher manas or abstract mind. Now, also here, the lower symbolism would be the third eye, the eye that looks out from between the two, can be the soul. So we would have soul, astral body, and lower mind. and the eye that looks out from between the two. If we study the formulas that are given to us in Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2, we will find about the eye which looks out from between the two. It can be the soul. Strictly physically, third eye in the brain, right eye and left eye. Okay, and then the Tibetan says, these three in reality. Now he's going to relate them to our descending stream of energy coming from what he calls the three great constellations. Okay, now these great constellations are not without effect in the life of the advancing disciple, because they are composed of certain stars, and some of those stars are to be noted in the horoscope of the advancing disciple. For instance, Alcyone, which is the central star in the Pleiades, is to be placed in the horoscope. Sirius is to be placed in the horoscope. And the particular star in the Great Bear, which is related to, let us say, your soul ray, is to be placed in the horoscope. So these, in fact, have an effect on our everyday life of discipleship. But now he lifts the whole game here into the cosmic area. He's no longer talking, do I dare do this? I don't know. Well, I'm going to try. He's no longer talking about the eyes operating down here in the area of the personality. He's no longer talking about the eyes working in the realm of the spiritual triad and representing the triad, left eye, right eye, and maybe, the synthetic eye or the monad and Atma as the synthetic eye. He's talking about something much more. He's going cosmic on us. The eye of the Father, and he connects it to the Great Bear, carrying the light of the Great Bear. Now, sometimes the Great Bear has been called the cosmic Manu because it distributes the first ray energy, and it stands for the 7 centers within the head of the greatest of the logoi we deal with, namely the one about whom naught may be said. So we have 7 centers inside our head, which are pretty much ruled by Vulcan and are the controlling centers. They are part of, Rule 8 in, if I was to go here to the beginning of the rays and initiations, and I was to go to, I don't know, some page in here, I probably would see the 8th rule, and where would it be? It should be here. Yeah, okay, I see I didn't get far enough. Here it is. When the disciple nears the portal, presumably of true initiation, the greater 7 must awaken and bring forth response from the lesser 7 upon the double circle. And there may even be 3 circles involved. So the greater 7 are found within the head, and they are ruled by the planet of will, which is Vulcan. So the Great Bear, shall we say, it holds the same function in this supercosmic logos as Vulcan holds within to our own 7 master centers inside the head. So when we're talking about the Great Bear, it's connected to the Eye of the Father, which I suppose is the Eye of Shiva, as Shiva is the Father. The Eye of the Sun carries light from Sirius, and it correlates with Buddhi. In a minute, we'll talk about the Eye of the Soul, because it is different from the third eye. And then the eye of the mother carries light from the Pleiades. So the left eye is correlated with that and with higher Manas. So these three are in reality, he says, as follows. And it is this latter light energy, I suppose this one here, which comes in under Capricorn, as you may remember. Remember that the three signs of the zodiac connected with the descending triangle are Leo for the Great Bear, Pisces for Sirius, and Capricorn for the Pleiades. So it is this latter light energy which is necessarily peculiarly active when the sign Taurus is dominant in any planetary and individual horoscope. So sometimes you've seen these Taurian people and they seem to have, you know, if they're reasonably advanced, they seem to have this light around their face, they seem to shine. And it's the energy coming from the Pleiades, which is a constellation very close to Taurus in the heavens. Okay, Taurus, the mother of illumination, and light demonstration is required. Okay, now before going on, I want to mention just a little something from this compilation that I would like to take up with you. So far, what do we have? You know, what do we have? We have the left eye, it's connected with Manas and maybe with higher Manas. We have the right eye, it's connected with Buddhi and at certain times with the astral body. And we have the central eye of Shiva, the blue eye, the eye of synthesis, the eye of the Father. So that's the general layout. And then when you look at the cosmic scene, the eye of Shiva is connected with the Great Bear. See, this is all triangles, right? Okay. The right eye is connected with Sirius. It's the eye of the soul in a way, and the left eye is connected with the Pleiades and is the eye of the personality. So we have spirit, soul, and personality as a triangle related to the Great Bear, spirit, Sirius, soul, and personality, the Pleiades. Okay, I know it's a lot of, you know, when we start getting into the cosmic side of things, you say, well, you know, why do I need all this? But remember that one of the things that's going to happen in the next 2,000 years is that the sixth sub-ray of the fifth root race is going to come into power. Now, that is not going to bring a full tide of intuition yet, because that development of the intuition has to do with the sixth root race, which kind of faintly begins in another 2,000 years or so, and then goes on for 10 million years, if what the Tibetans said can be credited as accurate, and of course, we have to credit it as accurate. So, but what does happen during the next 2,000 years, when the sixth sub race of the fifth root race comes into power, is that the abstract mind develops. The abstract mind. And what we're talking about here now in the science of triangles is very much about developing this kind of thinking that centers around the lowest part of the spiritual triad, or the monastic permanent atom. So when you get, you know, you start building your Antikarana, and the first point, the first target, the first linking has to do with the monastic permanent atom, from the mental unit to the monastic permanent atom. And you begin to learn, and of course studying DK will give this to you, you begin to learn to think in abstract terms of the wider patterns and the divine blueprints which organize all the concrete specificities in a certain configuration. Now, none of us is as good at this as we need to be. We need to become abstract thinkers and enter into at least the lowest portion of the spiritual triad as part of our mental equipment. That's going to take place during the next 2,000 years. And when we study the science of triangles in this way, it is creating that capacity for abstract thought. Now, one day soon, and maybe for many of us, the intuition will speak, and it will give us what's called straight knowledge, direct knowledge, pure reason. It comes from the fourth sub-level of the Buddhic plane. It will speak, but it has to be clothed properly in abstract thought in order to do any good in the lower worlds. So we must, I guess this is all by way of saying, the kind of thing we are studying now will develop the abstract mind. And we need that, and none of us is as good at doing this as we could be or should be. Now, if we were confirmed initiates of the third degree and had passed through the transfiguration, the abstract mind would be solidly within our capability, though obviously not as fully as for a master. See, the masters work in the realm of this triangle. They work in the realm of the spiritual triad. And we do not yet work in that triangle, but we can begin to receive energies from the triad if we will build the bridge of light. Okay, so I hope I've justified what I think is necessary for us in terms of these studies. Now, I want to point out something. We have a compilation here. It's a wonderful compilation, and it looks like it's 33 pages long. And I'm certainly not going to get into it in that way. But what I did with this long ago, 2007, I think, I took the references from the eye of the soul, from the third eye, from the spiritual eye, and the eye of Shiva, and I put them all together into a compilation. Now, this would be an intensive study, and it's not specifically the study of the science of triangles, so it needs a little group, perhaps, to spend a couple, 3 or 4 sessions on these different types of eyes, so we can judge how it is that we actually see. I mean, what are we seeing? What are we registering? You know, what it's a sense in a way, and what is impacting our consciousness according to the type of eye we are using. Now, the thing that I want to point out right now is that the eye of the soul is not the same as the third eye. And this is, you know, kind of, when I was reading this, kind of surprised me, because I always felt that, you know, the third eye and the eye of the soul would be comparable. But you can see even at the very beginning, the third eye is not the pineal gland, but it's etheric correspondence, and the area of the brain which is etherically around that etheric pineal gland. This is the responsive mechanism to the directing eye of the soul. They are distinct. The eye of the soul bringing revelation to the nature of the interior worlds of the kingdom of God and the divine plan. So we're going to get into this, but now here is a quotation which is from Esoteric Healing, page 571. So you might want to make a note of it. And I'd also like you to have this handout, by the way. I'm not sure how we can pull it off, because right now our handout possibilities are not working the way they should. And maybe, as Michael told me, I have to get the handouts in there before the program really begins. But this is a definition of the eye of the soul, and it's just something to think about for a little while. And it will help us get into this question of how do we see. Now, you may have noticed in astrology lately that the planet Uranus is now entering Taurus. Now, Uranus is not so happy in Taurus generally, because it's the position of its fall, opposite exaltation in Scorpio. However, Uranus always gives us a new and a fresh way of looking at things. And it's entered the eye, it's entered that planet associated with the eye, central eye, the eye of vision, and with light in general. So, I suspect that new light can be thrown upon our vision of reality during this 7-year period when Uranus is in Taurus. Now, that's for disciples. Obviously, for people who are not, entering these matters, it might, it might upset the whole financial system. Materially, many things will happen to humanity. It has more to do with the density of matter, which is, what do I call it, condensed or precipitated, densified light. That's how it works. Because the whole universe is light, but in various states of densification. So it will have a much more mundane effect. And there was a lot of that going on 80-something years ago when we were engaged in World War II. Uranus was pretty much in Taurus during that much of that time and in the lead up to it. So it does have some earth-quaking, earth-shattering effects on a mundane level. But on a higher level, a new type of vision can be conferred. So let's look at what he says here about the eye of the soul, and try to keep it distinct from the eye of Shiva, the synthetic eye within the brain. The eye of the soul. This is a point within the highest head center, the 1,000-petal lotus. So it's not in the center of the brain, right, as is the pineal gland. This eye of the soul can and does transmit energy to the ajna center and is itself the agent before the fourth initiation of the energy of the spiritual triad. The eye of the soul is the agent before the fourth initiation of the energy of the spiritual triad. After that, of course, it's body optional. You don't necessarily have a physical body unless you generate one as a Maya Virupa. This esoteric relationship is only set up when the soul is dominating its instrument, the personality, and is bringing all the lower activities under the physical, upon the physical plane under soul direction. So it's not everybody that's using the eye of the soul. I imagine that its use will correspond with the building of the Antikarana. We will see things more and more as they can be seen from the perspective of the consolidating vehicles of the spiritual triad. Okay. So, nor is the Eye of Shiva, the blue eye, the synthetic eye, used by everybody. It's usually opposites. It's Ida, it's Pingala, it's the fight between them for soul dominance. But eventually, the factor of synthesis enters in, and the Eye of Shiva is in a way controlled by this eye of the soul. He's not too specific about where we find it, because when he was talking to Roberto Assagioli, he basically said, I cannot tell you about the very occult details of the head center. It's a very occult center, and this information has been withheld. The thousand-petaled lotus, it's been withheld. But for the moment, and until we get into it, it's enough for us to know that this eye of the soul is a point within the highest head center, and it transmits into the brain and into the glands that are found there. Now, well, there's so much here. There's so much here. Later, the man uses the eye of the soul. Okay. So I want to get into it, and yet I don't want to get into it. I just want to arrange a time when we can clarify this business of the different kinds of eyes we can use. But for practical purposes, let's just say that if we build the Antakarana, which people of our type should be doing, then these higher agencies will begin to open up, and we will enter the realm of synthesis, and every three, in a way, will become a one, because the opposites will be reconciled with each other. Now, we don't want to forever be caught in some kind of alternation between pairs of opposites. We want to have a synthetic triangle which functions as one. This is an idea of the Trinity, the three and the one. For the healer, the center at the top of the head, the ajna center, and the alta major center form a triangle in rapid rotation at the time of the third initiation. And it's at that time that the true unity and oneness of things begins to become far more than just a theory and just a lot of words. It begins to appear before the consciousness. So we must reconcile the pairs of opposites in every triangle, and there's always a point that can do that, and establish a three, which is so interrelated that it becomes a one. That's our task. Okay, friends, let's see. In the next work, we'll get into this old commentary. You know, the sevenfold light of the Father brought from chaos into the ordered day his purpose and plan. The seven supreme gods bent to this purpose, and with united will ordain the plan. And that's a plan for a lot more than what's going on just on our little planet, or any planet, or even in our solar system. And so in the symbolic language, we will study these things. The Great Bear, Sirius, and also the Pleiades will be studied in terms of the old symbolic language. So I think that's as far as I need to go for right now. There's always plenty to deal with. And in another 2 weeks or so, until I can find a way and a time, to meet with you once a week. It would be desirable, of course. Let's see, what page are we on? Today is the 14th of September, and we'll get rid of that August thing. And it's the academic reading, and I don't know, I just want to get this straight, you know. We started on page 429, okay. And we didn't go very far. 429 to I suppose, 430. Not a whole lot, but then, you know, it's a pretty profound subject. So it's not August 17th. And we went from 429 just a page and 430. I put this in the wrong place. Just bear with me here for a minute. And this will be, this is the end of that. And let's see, the next thing will be the beginning of the science of triangles, academic reading, and it will be number 20. And we'll begin on page 430. And so far, the way it looks, we'll begin on the 28th of September. Now, I'll do my best. I'm going to be traveling some of this time, but I'll do my best to be with you and or to let you know that I cannot be. All right, friends. So we have looked at the eyes. We've looked at some different levels at which the eyes function within the personality, within the energy system, and even cosmically. And we've had a little discussion about this factor which mediates the energy of the spiritual triad and is called the eye of the soul. It's very mysterious, and it seems to direct the eyes that are found within the head per se. All right. Now, I fully realize that, well, let's just say I've always said that you can, when we have our little discussion here, you can bring up anything. It can be what we talked about, or it can be something else.
Michael?
Yes, Michael.
Frederick has several comments in the question box.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, Frederick, I've got you right here, centered. Abstraction can be an escape, or it can be a method of including in a coherent picture far more concrete details and relationships than would be possible otherwise. So we have to learn how to deal with symbols, geometrical and otherwise mathematical, in the abstract mind, so as to gather many concretions together and see them in one light. All I can say is, let's just not use, in other words, all I can say is, let's try to speak as proportionally as possible to the person we're speaking with. If we're speaking with a fellow disciple, as I'm speaking with you and those who come, here we are, all of us, attempting to fulfill our discipleship. I can speak in terms of these abstractions and of the Antikarana, which is meaningless to most, and of large patterns and blueprints and relationships which do not appear in the average type of thought. But if I'm meeting the person that I know is still working under the impulse of the personality, I'm not going to talk about these things. So that's part of what's called occult silence. You keep within your mind certain areas of thought sequestered from each other, and you use them as appropriate. There are so many ways to be isolated, you know. I'm remembering this disciple. She was a very good disciple, a great help to Alice Bailey. And she edited most of the books. And she was a Capricorn, you know, and she really was a hard worker. But she had what DK said, a lonely, isolated, first ray astral body. She had a lot of love, but she was afraid of that kind of spontaneous, sentient give and take with other people. So she was in a state of isolation. People on the first and fifth ray have a psychopathology which involves isolation, and DK says makes them at length almost untouchable. So sometimes, you know, abstraction can be the opposite of isolation. It can give people like such a big picture that they really feel like they participate in areas of the universe where they never thought to go. I'm remembering some books called, if I'm correct, The Power of 10, and it took things up by the power of 10 until you just had a vast reach of vision. And then it took things down by the power of 10. And the result was that even though this was quite a mathematical thing, it made you feel like you were related more to these different levels which the abstract formula introduced you to. So it just depends on how it works, you know. Basically, we have to use our intuition. We have to use our heart. We have to feel the other person. Now, the psychologists of the world, they use the head center, they use the throat center, they use the heart center, and they use the solar plexus to allow them to relate to the people who are focused in that way. We are learning how to be esoteric psychologists. Every member of the hierarchy is an esoteric psychologist one way or another. And we have to also learn in the immediate situation what is cutting us off from people and what is allowing for a productive and elevating rapport. So thank you for your thoughts. And right, exactly. The question of abstraction and isolation. Yeah, it's true, you know, you can just get way out there and talk about things that nobody can understand or wants to understand, and, you know, you'll cut yourself off from others. Or through abstraction, you can slowly elevate the thinking power of those who need to widen their mind. And yes, of course, look, we're going to deal with people here, aren't we, all the time? This is not, these materials are not so we can have any pleasure, says DK, in receiving them a bit before the rest of humanity. It would show a very wrong motivation if we were somehow pridefully saying, okay, well, look at what I'm studying and look at what I'm thinking about, and you're not. It's all meant to produce a greater relationship of love, wisdom, and illumination, and a willingness to sacrifice for that measure of the divine plan that we can sense. So, you know, we're not going to escape using any faculty in the human energy system. There's a lot of ways to escape, you know. You can run and hide in a closet. I mean, there's a lot of ways to escape, but we are not allowed to escape, and we're not allowed to escape from the group gaze, you know, and he talks about this. Everything comes to light. Each one sees and knows the villainy of each, the rules of the road, right? And yet there is, with that great revelation, no turning back, no spurning of each other, no shakiness upon the road. The road goes forward into day. Okay, well, thank you. So maybe we can have clarified a point. As you said, as you wisely said, the difference between abstraction and isolation. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Frederick. Okay, what else, Michael? What else have we got here?
He also
Anything?
says the eye of the soul is associated to a special energy vibration.
Yes, and that is correct. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, the spiritual triad. And what's interesting is that there comes a point, too, when the ajna center itself gives a point of anchorage for the spiritual triad. You know, it's that kind of it's kind of a Libran center, you know, and it's threefold in its own way. It has that synthesizing point, and then the two pedals, 48, 48, and maybe this one is. It brings us up to, what does it bring us up to? 48, 48, and is it what, 96, something like that? And then the central synthesizing point, and this eye of the soul directs triadal energy into the ajna center, and from the ajna center, as the Shiva eye affects it, as the eye of the soul affects it, comes the power to raise the kundalini in the appropriate way. So, you know, I'm hoping, well, you know, seven years exists before Master DK says he will start writing again. I mean, we just don't know how the masters view the last 75 years, let us say, from the time he stopped with Alice Bailey. She passed on, and 30 years work was completed, and the time of assimilation came. Okay, we don't know how he's going to tell us his perspective. What happened in the last 75 or so years, according to the perspective of hierarchy. But one thing we do know is that he said it's a three-part dispensation, and these bridging treatises have a third part to go, to run. And 2025 or thereabouts is the year that third dispensation begins. So I'm very interested to see if some of what he said are very occult matters in this Alice Bailey second dispensation, if he doesn't go somehow more deeply, more practically into them. There's only so much he can write for the general public. I mean, people get their hands on books, and they just start trying things. They just start doing things in an unprepared manner. You know, you give somebody some magical words, and before you know it, they're just going to be using those magical words without the proper foundation. And that's why the kind of work that we do, which is, I would say, a broad education and a deep education in these matters of the ageless wisdom, is so important a foundation to the practical occultism, which otherwise would be very dangerous. In other words, we would not be prepared, and we would be like the sorcerer's apprentice. We would be in over our heads. So we have to be patient, and yet we have to move forward with all due deliberate speed. Okay, this is how Mary Bailey used to talk about it all the time, you know. Okay, anything else there that I've missed, Michael?
Frederick also writes, sensing the energy waves of others is important.
Yeah, and that I felt, you know, our rapport through intuition, through heart, and even through the solar plexus, that's important. Well, you know, if we escape from ourselves, we're going to escape from others. And so I'm going on to the next point. And people have this unwillingness to see the truth about themselves. But the occultist in training is courageous enough to look at what is and say, okay, this is what is. I have no basis for improvement if I do not see with accuracy the condition that actually exists. So how we treat ourselves in a way, and the truth with which we approach our condition, is the truth with which we approach others. So there's a timing, as you say, everything happens when it means to be, and there is a timing, absolutely. And matter of fact, what DK said is that if we don't get the group initiation going and really become more adept at that and use that as the method of initiation in the future, the time space schedule of our planetary logos cannot be met. So we have a very definite planetary timing. I suppose we have a solar systemic timing as well. And all of that filters down into the planet Saturn. Now, Saturn is the Lord of time, and maybe Uranus is the dispenser of space. These things are related to the third ray. It's the Lord of time, and it's the planet of discipleship. And I think that tells the story that the disciple has to be very conscious of how he or she uses time. Master Mori, of course, he's oftentimes pretty direct and sometimes harsh, so it seems. And he talks about time, and you better not waste it. He says, because if you waste your own time, it's equivalent to suicide. So this is, the first ray talking. And if you waste the time of another, it's equivalent to murder. Now, I guess that kind of thing gets your attention. It certainly got my attention many years ago when I read it, and I said, well, these are definitely serious matters, the use of time. And then we have, of course, the statement that time is of the essence. So can we stick with the cycles? If we can, we will have, let's see now, where am I here? There's okay, I would have to try to find that. Just trust me for this, that the faculty of all knowledge, at least with respect to our planet, I suppose, is found on the atmic plane. The atmic plane is the third plane down, and on the third subplane of the atmic plane is all knowledge. It's a very Saturnian plane, and it's very related to the third ray, the monadic nature of Saturn. When we can finally achieve that altitude of capability, then we will really know the times and the seasons and when things are meant to be. Right now we have a few things. He gives us a few cycles. He gives us a few numbers, and we try to respond accordingly. Now, for instance, we know that every 100 years there is a great conclave. In the year 25 of every century, 1825, 2025, we observe that cycle. Right now, many of us are thinking in response to knowledge about that 100-year first ray cycle, and knowing that the great conclave, but it's the end of the 60-year period of the forerunner, which began in 1965, 1 year before the Buddha appropriated the triadal vestures of the Christ appropriated the triadal vestures of the Buddha. 60 years, and we have 7 years left. In other words, that cycle means something to us, and we operate accordingly. There are other cycles of 3 years, 7 years, 9 years, and so forth, which we can also look up, and we can see crisis, tension, emergence, and so forth, how they operate, and we operate with respect to them, but we have to do it consciously. Now, it'll happen anyway, but the true disciple initiate is going to cooperate consciously with the onset of these cycles and the disappearance of these cycles. Now, on page 26 of Esoteric Psychology 1, here, you know this page, and probably a lot of people do, are some important, here, I'll put this back now, are some important cyclic information. And here it is. Ray 1, not in manifestation, well, yes and no. It's in manifestation, and it's preparing for the, at least it's preparing for the Aquarian age and the reappearance of the Christ, and Master Mori is very much involved, but perhaps the first Ray ashrams are the last to organize. Ray 2 has a 500-year cycle, which we learn about elsewhere, and it started in 1575, so by 2075, that 500-year cycle will be over. Will the interim last 500 years? I don't know, but if it does, it'll be a while before it comes in again in strength. Nevertheless, it'll be the period of the Christ. The entire Aquarian age will be, so the second ray will be present. Now here, Ray 3 is a 900-year cycle. So in the year 2325, that cycle will be over, and it's 450 years. So look at that. The year the Theosophical Society was formulated, established, 1875, was the midway point of that 900-year cycle. And look, it's also the beginning of the Renaissance in Italy, particularly, and that, you know, it spread for almost 200 years throughout Europe, and it involved the liberation of the thinking power of the human being. Ray 4, from its coming in from its monadic aspect from the year 2025, and already even in 1925, it was showing signs of influence. Ray 5, ever since 1775, and it's a 350-year cycle. Some of the, now, D.K. didn't say that. He did say Ray 1, 100 years, Ray 7, 700 years. I'm keeping it in the hundreds, okay? And Ray 2, 500 years. And I think there's some others in there, but Stephen Pugh has done a lot of work on this, and he comes up with 350 years, or 35 or 3,500 for the Ray 5 cycle. And notice how the Industrial Revolution began then. And DK actually gives the 150-year cycle of Ray 6, or the 1,500-year cycle of the 15,000, and it began to pass out mercifully, I think, because you know, the Counter-Reformation was in full swing from the year 1600, and a lot of the gains of the Renaissance were challenged. So it began passing out in 1625 and will be gone entirely by the end of this century. And then Ray 7, here is the seventh ray coming in. And interestingly, I'm trying to think about when, gosh, 1685 was at the same year that both Bach and Handel were born. Handel lived a bit longer. Bach lived until 1750. Handel lived until 1759. Uh, some have maybe in jest said there would have been no Victorian era without Handel. He somehow the magnificence of the seventh ray and its stately qualities, he managed to capture that, as well as the marvelous Messiah and other things. And Bach was the great mathematical, brilliant genius organizer using the seventh ray. So they were born just as the seventh ray cycle was coming in. Look, so this is what we want to consult, is what I'm saying, when we talk about things happen at the right time. They do, but we have to be aware of them. That's the point. And work consciously with them, even in our own little life. Now, before long, we're going to be able to look at every year of our life and see what rays were prominently influential according to a certain pattern of the appearance of the rays. We can already do that with astrology. We can say what signs, what planets, whatever influential, but and we can talk about the rays that come through those planets and signs and all that, but we don't yet know the ray cycles for every year of our life. And that's something that I'm trying to work on, and I'm sure some other people are working on it too. Okay, right, so that's about doing things at the right time. Okay, everybody. Well, then, look, I'll tell you what, Tuya is usually with us here, but not this morning because of other requirements up there in the frozen north. It's not too frozen yet, but it is Arctic up there. It'd be nice to have some meditation meetings up there, which we do have, and we'll let you know about that possibility. Okay, are there any other questions or statements that you would like to make or offer, whatever? Anything else before we have just a little sort of triangles alignment?
I am not seeing any hands raised or any other questions posted.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Okay, well, Frederick provided such rich questions and comments that it could keep us going, you know. So that led to other ideas which I think were useful for everybody. All right, so let's get into this. There's a lot of triangles in this particular map. It's DK's map, of course, but Tuya colored it in, and all these colors have significance. All right, so friends, the idea here, we have triangles. Probably every one of us is involved, or should be at least in one triangle, I would say. Ah, wait a second. Tuya is here. Tuya, you're self-muted. Would you like to offer the little closing meditation? Unfortunately, I can't unself-mute you. Are you there? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi. Would you like to offer the little closing triangle meditation, or?
I am very uncertain because this is cutting, that the line is not strong for me.
Okay.
Because I have to come and go, so, or it comes and goes, so maybe it's better that you do that there.
Okay, well, it'll just be brief, but nice to hear you. Okay, I'll just I'll do that. Okay, I'll do that. Okay, so let's imagine this is, you know, I'm not doing the Tibetan's method at this point. It's just drawn from it, you might say. What he has said is that imagine a triangle above your head, but it's a downward pointing triangle, and it touches, the apex of it touches your head center. And then as you look at that triangle, to the left is the solar angel, and to the right is Master DK. And that triangle is golden orange in color, and it's a solid triangle. And we imagine this golden orange light coming from the higher mental plane, where the solar angel is working, where the master is working, and down into your head center. And then through every part of your personality. And we absorb this color. And he says, bathe in the color as you would in the waters of the sea. And you just do that and don't worry about the why and the wherefore. And he will, he says, leave the rest to me. And he says this will help us deal with many of our issues. And we're supposed to do this, upon awakening. Either, don't have to get out of bed, sit up and do it, or in a chair and start the day that way before your normal meditation. And we might then imagine why the soul, or at least the egoic lotus, is called a triangle. And it has to do with the threefold nature of the causal body, or egoic lotus. There's the jewel in the lotus, which is a direct emanation of the monad. And there are the 12 petals of the lotus, which, of course, if they were all unfolded for us, we would be 4th degree initiates. So they're in process of unfolding. And then there's the atomic triangle at the base of the lotus. It's 3 major parts. So that triangle is hovering above the square. The square is the personality. And we might look at it as the etheric, physical, astral, and lower mental, plus their synthesis as the integrated personality, the square. The triangle above the square. And you sometimes see, people with the Masonic apron, they display that also outside the lodge, so one can speak of it. And the triangular flap is above the square, and at a certain point, it turns downward. And the soul pervades, enters the field of the personality. Now, think of that in your own etheric body. how these triangles are becoming more and more intercommunicating. And how basically you have, even within your own little energy system, a network of triangles. And that's the same if you visualize the etheric body of our planet. And increasingly, as we work, as the initiates and masters work, as the Lord of the world works, that etheric body will become more and more filled with living triangles, and we're even now beginning to participate. So think for a moment. I put my triangles, Julia does too, in a list, because you got to remember, But let's think of our little network of triangles. And let's feel first the light of the soul pouring through us. From the triangle into the square. Let's feel the goodwill and the love of the soul pouring through us. And we are developing also the sense of a sacrificial will. And that's also beginning to pour through our personality nature. So with these energies pouring through, imagine the members of your little triangles network having the same. They are also filled with these energies which are circulating in every triangle. And let's spend a few moments naming our triangles members and seeing that light, that goodwill, that love, that sense of sacrifice. Let's see it circulating. We'll spend maybe a few minutes doing this, visualizing this. light and love and goodwill, which is love in action, circulating through your little network and is going out into the wider network, and you see that wider network growing in depth and brilliance and power and number. And while we hold that vision of the network, we'll sound the great invocation together. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. We'll continue, as I say, it's our goal to try to do this more often, because I realize we're kind of leaving out. It's so wee hours in the United States and in Brazil. We are leaving people out, and we don't really want to do that if we have only the morning schedule here in Finland. So we'll see what we can do about that, and then I hope it doesn't hurt those of you who are in the South Pacific. If we have the nighttime meeting, I guess we can all be present together, but we can't be present at the same time. Tonight we have at 5 p.m. the Dissipation of Glamour webinar, and we're working on telling the truth, which seems to be at a premium these days. What is reality? Let reality govern my every thought, and truth be the master of my life. So we'll be working on that particular glamour, and as it seems to be really important at this time. So we wish you a very fine day, and we thank you for your attendance, and we'll just go on to you, and I will let you know when we have our various broadcasts. And sometimes, as you know, we have the difficulty of travels and things of that nature, but let's see. I'm supposed to be, yes, okay, that's okay. I thought there were two of me for just a second, but yeah, okay. I said, well, I have to do the A.S.K program tonight, but I realized that is the dissipation of glamour. So anyway, thank you, many blessings, lots of love from both of us and all of us, and we'll be talking to you. Look, these will be available. I'm working on it, and maybe they already are, but will be available on Makara, and hopefully to a degree on the YouTube. And Michael, let's see if we can look into that with Joe and BL and see that these continue to get posted, so that if you miss one and you want to participate in the meditation and the discussion, you can catch it. Okay? Okay, we'll see you now. All the best, and bye for the moment.